All right, we are now returning to decorum. All competitors should be returned. We are now actually 47 minutes past the hour. So we are now in line to open the floor for debate on the second bill of the docket, which is in legislation 4B, entitled A Bill to Protect Business Owners from Resource Loss. Do I have a sponsor? Senator Altman, unopposed.
Hey everyone, Senator Altman, Biggest Bird Institute. Y'all know the drill. Just give me an indication if you're not ready. Just like holler at me. Okay, I'm gonna get started then. Hey senators, disaster has struck. During my last speech, I told you how Walmart got caught in 4K, but this time it was me. You see, I lost my re-election. Senator Ostheimer beat me in the runoff. Senator Kareem canceled me on Twitter. And my own colleague at the Biggest Bird Institute, Senator Bozarbaki, voted in the negation for forced arbitration. And now that I'm off the lobbyist payroll, I am forced to work at McDonald's. So I'm legally obligated to disclose that McDonald's Corporation is paying me $1 million to give you the speech. The principal reason as to why you passed my bill, and my sole argument, is because employers take huge losses from employees who quit early. So first, allow me to contextualize the problem facing McDonald's and other corporations under the status quo. The Harvard Business Review writes in 2017 that US companies spent over $90 billion on training. And in addition, the Harvard Business Review concluded that 1 in 4 employees quit their job during the first 90 days of it, which means that companies such as McDonald's take huge profit losses on expensive training that 25% of their employees barely use. So what actually changes then when you pass my legislation? When you pass with Section 2, companies can now recuperate 75% of training costs from employees who quit in the first 90 days. This leads to 2 key impacts, senators. One, because companies aren't losing significant revenue on training drops, now consumer prices are lowered, which means in turn, you're increasing economic output. But 2, because companies are able to recuperate 75% of the money from new hires who quit within the first 90 days, it gives workers an incentive to actually stay with their employer, which in turn strengthens the economy and decreases unemployment. But more importantly than economics, why does protecting business owners from resource loss even matter in the first place? Because small businesses hurt the most from resource loss. The CNBC writes in 2022 that 75% of small businesses are seeing a rise in the cost of their supplies. And overall, it takes about $2,000 for supplies and training for each employee for a small business. Meaning, even though resource loss hurts big companies like McDonald's, it hurts small companies run by the average American. And this hurts close to home because I own a small business, the Biggest Bird Institute, and I wouldn't be able to afford the early employment resource loss if Senator Bozarbaki decided to call it quits. At the end of the day, senators, I have fought for equity throughout this tournament, whether it be ending forced arbitration for employees or promoting small businesses from resource loss. This tournament is about equity. This bill is about equity. And the Ronald McDonald Food System Corporation has paid me to tell you that they are about equity. Pass.
Thank you, Senator Altman, for that sponsorship speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. All questions, please rise for 4 blocks. That will first go to Senator Singh.
Great speech, Representative. So actually, a lot of studies show that companies who invest in employee training and development tend to have higher revenues. So why do we need to refund?
Because there are companies, especially small businesses, whenever employees leave after the first 90 days, they end up taking a loss on the employment.
But shouldn't we
So
focus
that
on the
statistic
majority?
isn't true because it doesn't correlate to small businesses such as my own.
Okay, well, so say that we do pass this bill. Why does it go into implementation on October 5th?
What?
Why does it go into implementation on October 5th? What
Senator
are we waiting
Burgess.
Thank you for your speech, Representative. Can you quantify the number of, in dollars, how much businesses are saving?
Bro, I got no clue.
Okay, so how can you say that the cost of most products in the United States are going to go down when you can't give us a number saying how much they're going to go down by?
Well, it's clear when companies spend less on the supply, that means that they are able to decrease the amount that their product
But
costs.
approximately what
Simple
impact does that
economics.
have?
What? You cut me off, I'm sorry.
What impact does that have?
Well, it increases economic output
Senator
and also
Patel.
prices are cheaper for those with low income.
What type of industry is most affected in the status quo?
I would probably
Based off
say
of training
service-based-
and leave, it would be minimum wage jobs,
I'm
correct?
sorry, what did you say?
Based off of training and leave, it would be minimum wage jobs, correct?
Okay, yeah, I agree.
So can these minimum wage workers actually pay for the training and the status quo?
Well,
working.
assuming that they're working for minimum wage, I would say no.
Exactly, and they're gonna be the ones most affected by this legislation,
Right.
as you
Senator
yourself.
Collier.
Hey, Senator, so what does the average worker at McDonald's make?
Depends on the state, but like in Texas, probably like 12 or 13. Depends on how good you are at negotiating.
Is that enough to live a sustainable life in our country?
No.
And is that up to corporations to compensate their workers fairly?
No, but companies also have the right, like, to be able to recuperate the amount that they gain on training because
Okay,
they're
but
giving you the resources.
realistically, are
Yeah.
corporations losing a lot of money in the status quo?
The
Com-
questioning
small
block has
businesses are
elapsed
insane.
and the speaker may be muted. Thank you to Biggest Bird Institute. As we are now in line for speech and the negation, all negative speakers, please do hold the placard up. Upon recency, that all first go to Senator Mohammed.
When looking at today's legislation, we must realize that these are traps. If we look at how they work, how they function, we can see that these training repayment agreements are traps. They are dangerous for the employees and they often lead to negative consequences for them. In particular, we must first start by contextualizing how these things work. We must realize that when it comes to these, we see that these trapped agreements are they are spawned when people sign on within employment contracts, and these are provisions that basically impose huge fees on workers for on-the-job training. If they try to leave before the arbitrarily determined date set by the employer, then the training question can then be recuperated by the employer. And this is stated by the Student Borrower Protection Center. We see that within the legislation itself, it states that employers may recoup up to 75% of all training costs if the employee self-terminates within the probationary period for any reason. We see that on average, small companies spend about $1,400 per employee and medium-sized companies spend about $800 per employee. 75% of either of those would be a significant amount of money, especially earned within 90 days. We can see examples of how these trap agreements have worked in the past. In Ohio, according to Forbes 2021, there was an example where a roofing product sales company made their salesperson repay $42,000 if they left the job in 3 years or less, a training repayment agreement that was upheld by a court. We see that these are continuing to become more and more popular with once again Forbes 2021 reporting that offering reduced or no pay during training periods, or by expecting that workers will apply having already learned job-specific skills from post-high school degrees, that these are something that are continuing to become more and more popular. And it's very difficult for employees to overturn these once again because after repaying their training costs, unless they were paid less than minimum wage, the state and federal laws often allow for TRAs. So what we can see happening here is that by mandating that all companies use this, we are only continuing to push and to normalize a negative practice that continues to harm our constituents. Once again, on our last topic, we were discussing a lot about how we need to protect workers. This is just another way for big corporations to exploit workers for lack of bargaining power and because of the fact that they are literally gouging them. They are forcing them to sign within their contracts something that will prevent them from being able to negotiate, something that will prevent them from being able to recuperate, and something that will prevent them from being able to leave a toxic workplace if they find within the first 90 days that this job is not for them. It limits the rights of the employees and forces them and puts them into a forced labor situation. we as the Senate cannot allow for this to happen, and so for that reason, we have no choice but to negate.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed, for that speech in the negation of 2 minutes and 58 seconds. All questioners, please rise for 4 blocks. That will first go to Senator Altman.
Hi. How are we like forcing workers into slavery if my bill specifically says that they're signing employment agreements where then they're required to have the training repayment agreement? Like they're signing an agreement first.
Once again, it states within section 1 of the bill that we have here today that employment agreements will be required to contain this. So once again, this would be a forced labor incident.
Okay. What's the net harm of having this forced labor incident when it's not really a forced labor incident where they still have like
Senator Berntessen.
place?
Thanks so much for that speech. The one that you brought up, the 42,000, was that in Texas?
That was in Ohio.
Ohio. Does Ohio have any regulations around this area?
Yes, but once again, it comes down to the fact that it's very difficult to actually.
They don't actually have a minimum or a requirement in Ohio to have this. Would this requirement and regulation, therefore, under this bill, actually stop this from happening?
No, because once again, it normalizes it.
No, it would though, wouldn't it? Because we're setting a minimum of 90 days, not 3
Senator
years.
Nguyen.
Wait, so like if you're a worker and you apply to this jobs after we pass, would you know like you'd have to stay in like the training repayment programs and have to pay?
Once again, but you don't know what working environments are going to go into, and those working environments could be dangerous. They could be toxic.
Before you like apply to like a job, you should probably like research about the job, right? Like
Once again, you don't know who you're going to be working with. There are a series of factors
what
that
if I,
you just do not have
to a
control over.
job? Isn't that like my choice like into the program? Like
Once
no,
again, this would require it for all jobs to
I just
mean
wanna
that you would
understand how
have
this
to
is,
be
like,
forced
able
under
to
the system.
if like they
Are there
have
any further questioners? We have 1 block remaining. Senator Patel.
In the status quo is exploitation through TRAs happening. So basically,
Once again, this would only continue to mainstream it. This would only continue to push
Yeah,
for
like,
more normalization.
people are having 100% of TRAs in the status quo. Is that happening in any region throughout the United States?
Yes, once again, but it shows that
That-
TRAs are exploitative practices and
But
something
ma-
that needs to be
By mandating
fixed.
that has to be 75%, we actually solve for that, correct?
Once again, 75% is still a large portion, especially considering that
The
it's within a
question
90
time has
period.
elapsed and the speaker may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, all affirmative speakers, please raise a placard. Senator Sullivan.
I thank the chair. This is Senator Sullivan speaking for the first time this session. Hearing no verbal objections, I will begin in just a moment. All I can tell you for certain is that if I worked for the biggest bird institute, I don't know how long I would last, but it would likely be less than 90 days. Today, it is time that we work together to pass this legislation to protect small companies like the Institute, and second, create more valuable employment opportunities and create higher retention rates. First, passing today protects small businesses. I know within the status quo, many small businesses spend a lot of money on training their staff, especially because many of these businesses are very specialized. For example, in my town, the first couple of small businesses I think of specialize in jewelry, swimming lessons, and then of course the snow cone shack I work at in the summer. We see from the Association for Talent Development, and we have already heard from the negation, that the average training cost per employee is at least $1,252 per employee. For smaller companies, especially in comparison to the larger ones, this money is an amount that can simply not be forked over if the employee were to not stay with the company. It's only a $313 loss after the 75% is repaid under this legislation. Despite what Senator Mohammed says, even for large companies like Walmart, Google, and others, spending this money, even though undesirable, is affordable, as they make more than that money each second. For smaller businesses, making this investment of the whole training cost with no return on it can put an entire company out of business, whereas the smaller 25% is a more feasible option, especially knowing that they now have to fork over rehiring costs to rehire that position. By passing today, we protect the smaller businesses and are able to keep them in our society, even though it is a small inconvenience for the employee to repay. However, it is also a double-edged sword because even if they have to repay the company back, they're able to take the information learned with them, and that will only benefit their future as a whole. Next, when employees are more confident that their hires will stay with the company, it leads to more quality employment opportunities. When I was little, I wanted to play every instrument imaginable. I played the cello, the guitar, the violin, and more, but each only for a couple of weeks. I found out after that my parents always rented, never purchased the instrument because they were not confident I would stick to it. When employers know that everyone they hire will stay with their company, they are more likely to spend more money and time on them, which will in turn create better employees in our workforce. Next, we see from Harvard Business Review that the second reason hiring is so difficult is because retention has become tough. Companies hire from their competitors and vice versa, so they have to keep replacing people who leave. We see that retention is hard. And if we pass today, we're able to see more quality over quantity as turnover rates will go down and retention rates will go up, creating a better workforce for all. Because when employees know that they're being spent quality time and quality money on their training, their education, and making them the best employee they can be, they're going to want to stick with that company and provide quality work back for them. Today, it's imperative that we pass because if we do not, we're going to lose access. We're going to lose access to the potential we have in our workforce and also harm our small businesses as a whole. And this is why you must vote F.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan, for that speech in the affirmation of 2 minutes and 59 seconds. All questioners, please rise for 2 blocks. That will first go to Senator Singh.
Great speech, Representative. So don't you think that employees would actually feel more uncomfortable if they're stuck in a work environment that they can't leave because they can't pay back the funding?
So all they have to do is make it 90 days and then they have to pay back. If they,
But
as long as
that's
they,
still 90 days of uncomfort. What if they're
that's
being
90 days
harassed
of
at-
adjusting to a new environment and learning the ways of the workforce.
Maybe it's not adjusting to a new environment. Like, what about employees who have to face assault, harassment? What if they have no one to go to for these issues?
I believe the specific scenario that this bill was like not directly addressing.
But we have to address all scenarios because at the end of the day, like this,
Senator
each bill does not
Mohammed.
address.
Once again, continuing the line of questioning that Senator Singh just was pushing, once again, are there not a series of situations by which this would be very dangerous?
There are situations where it may be dangerous, but at the same time, the employee has the choice to get to sign a job at that company. They understand in the environment of the workplace going into it.
How
Like
does this-
through their interview, through their onboarding
for
process.
people making
before they're
minimum
hired.
wage, for people making minimum wage, wouldn't the reimbursement of the company not lead them to make below minimum wage, which would go against federal law?
So they're paying
The
that back
question
in a
block
lump sum.
has concluded. The speaker may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, all negative speakers, please do raise a placard. Senator Bowser Baki.
Hey everyone, Senator Bowser Baki, Biggest Bird Institute. Y'all know the drill. Give me an indication if you're not ready. This Congress loves to force progress, and most of the time I'd say we're well-intentioned, but far too often it's our unyielding desire to force progress that simultaneously becomes the unstoppable hand that pulls us back. It's because today, this Congress is trying to force progress in repayment, which will only hinder the equity of this nation. I urge you to negate primarily because of the disastrous economic reverberations that passing would have. So fundamentally, you'll negate because this legislation attempts to combat a slight problem with the wrong ways, limiting the freedom of individuals that are seeking a job. So first, let's understand the status quo and assess whether or not we want to change it. Senator Oltman claims that the issue that exists today is that businesses are losing out on their money when employees are training and leaving. Let me clarify. The burden of financial consequences should not fall upon the employees in the probationary period because it's not their job to recruit adequate employees. Rather, it's the business's fault for hiring that individual for training in the first place because businesses are the ones that need to ensure that both sides of the party, the employers and the employees, are on the same page for what will and what will not happen during the probationary period to avoid issues. But sure, let's take Senator Sullivan and the rest of the affirmation at their highest ground. Employees leaving during probationary periods and reaping the financial incentives may be an issue, But when you're trying to pass legislation that inadequately addresses this very problem, you're only making it worse. With Section 2, it requires a training repayment agreement for new employees still in their probationary period, allowing employers to recoup up to 75% of all training costs if the employee self-terminates within that period. With Section 1, this is enforceable within 90 days of employment, meaning that if you're trying to get a paycheck from the biggest bird institute that you hardly train for, and if you no longer want to work that job for any reason, that sucks. You're stuck at a penny-paying job for 3 months and you have no freedom whatsoever. At the end of the day, I'm all for fixing the issue of financial burdens on businesses, but I don't want to terminate the freedom of individuals. For that reason, inspired by Senator Ozheimer at the FBK, I'll be amending this legislation to only allow the enforcement of repayment within 30 days to make it fair for our constituents. Because until this Congress starts treating people with dignity instead of digits and help instead of hindrance, repayment will only spread more disruption. Fail.
Thank you, Senator Bazarbaki, for that speech in the negation of 2 minutes and 55 seconds. All questioners, please rise. Senator Sullivan.
Is 30 days enough time for an employee to decide if they like a job and are willing to stay in that environment?
Most definitely.
So you're saying that an employee can learn everything they need to know about their job within 30 days?
Sure, they can have enough information that they need in order to know if they want to continue or not continue in that job.
Even though in the status quo, 90 days is a more just.
No, 90 days is too much because it binds them to that job if they want their paycheck.
But they're still learning throughout that entire 90 days.
Again,
30 days
it's
is enough?
still unfair for you to determine that they need to stay at that job for 90 days because if they don't like it, then they can't leave.
Senator Nguyen.
Wait, so workers, they can still leave, they just lose money, right?
They can leave. If they leave within 30 days, they're going to have to do the repayment. But if they leave 31 days after, then they don't.
5%, right? What happens to the other 25%?
I'm sorry, you cut me off. I didn't hear that.
It's like 75% they have to pay back. What happens to like the other 25%?
Sure, they keep that 25%.
No, the businesses have to pay the 25% of the cost they spend on training.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the first place, they were able to bring these individuals and they
Right.
trained,
So the
meaning that the
businesses don't want to lose
individuals
money, right?
deserve to get incentive for that.
So businesses
The
don't want to lose
questioning
money,
block
right?
has concluded and the speakers may be muted.
Point of order
State that.
or point of inquiry.
State that.
I would like to propose my amendment.
That would be a motion to propose an amendment.
Motion to propose an amendment.
Is your amendment fully written out in a form that is
Yes.
accessible to our judges?
Yes,
Would you
I can
please-
go ahead and.
Would you please share that with the parliamentarian so they can deem the germanity of that?
A point of order, actually, under TOC rules, the PO determines it. It's in section 8 of the TOC.
Apologies, I was going by NSTA rules.
I thought we
So-
were going.
Are we going by
Point of
NSTA?
inquiry.
This is like a TOC tournament.
Okay, decorum, please.
Point of inquiry.
Parliamentarian, are we going by NSTA or TOC rules?
Let's just use NSDA because unfortunately we're
Alright,
not the
so-
TOC.
Could parliamentarian please make a ruling on the germanity of our proposed amendment?
It's germane.
Okay, as the amendment has been ruled germane, we will now move to a vote. Seeing as there are 11, I believe, active members of this chamber, a 2/3 vote to pass this amendment would be 8 votes. If you are in favor, has everyone had sufficient time to read the amendment proposed by Senator Bazarbaki? We will now move to a vote.
Point of order, I think you would have to have a 1/3 second to even debate the amendment in the first place.
You would be correct. Okay. Is there 4 people, are all in favor of debating the amendment? Please raise your placard. Seeing as there are sufficient votes, with 1/3 being 4 people in this chamber, we will now debate the amendment,
Motion.
the amended bill.
Motion.
The bill has been amended to
Point of order.
state that.
I believe we never voted on whether or not we were going to adopt the amendment.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're voting on whether we should debate the amendment.
Yeah.
Yes, so now we're debating on whether or not we should debate the amendment. So a 2/3 vote is required, I believe, yes.
To move to previous question on the amendment.
Okay. Parliamentarian,
Unless there's-
can you step in here?
Yeah, we just went through the 1/3 vote to begin debate on the amendments. Now we're in the debate period. We need a 2/3 majority of previous question to then vote on whether or not to adopt the amendments, which on its own will be a 1/2 majority vote to actually apply the amendment to the bill. So right now we're in the debate phase, and I believe we have senators proposing motions to move to previous question.
Okay, is there a motion to move the previous question? Senator Patel, state that.
I move to previous question on the amendment.
Are there seconds? Are there any who are opposed? Seeing as a 2/3 vote is required to move to previous question on the amendment, 8 people are required. All in favor of moving to previous question on the amendment, please raise a placard. I count 1 seeing a clear majority, a clear 2/3 majority, that amendment will pass. And we are now in the phase of debating the amendment.
Point of order, you're supposed to call for people who wants to pass and fail and abstain.
Point of inquiry.
State that.
Tia, what point of the amendment process are we in?
We are
Voting on
current-
the amendment.
We have passed the amendment and
Point of order, that is, we have not passed the amendment. We haven't even, we were
We passed-
motioning,
okay.
we were motioning to move previous question.
So
We
Alright.
should, we should
my
be able to
apologies.
vote.
Okay, so we are now moving to debate, yes? Parliamentarian? Okay. so
No,
we are now
call
moving
for
to
a 1/2
we need
majority
1/2
vote.
majority to apply the amendment. All who wish to apply the amendment, please raise a placard. I count 1 Senator Bhattacharya, 2 Senator Altman, 3 Senator Patel, 4 Senator Burgess, 5 Senator Mohammed. In a chamber of 11, that is not sufficient to pass the amendment. My apologies to the sponsor. We are back to debating the original bill. All right, seeing as we have concluded a speech on the negation, are there any speakers on the affirmation of the original bill? That will first go to Senator Patel.
Thank you. Speaking for the second time and hopefully last in this legislative session, I will shortly begin unless there's any other indication otherwise. And if I'm not glitching, am I glitching out? I'm lacking a bit on my end.
You're good.
Okay, thank you. I will shortly begin my speech. The ongoing tug of war between corporations and employees over who should benefit from the training repayment agreements under this legislation will have finally come to an end. As we tie the knot of a compromise and cut the rope of conflict, let's weave a tapestry of cooperation by cutting the rope of division and tying together the threads of collaboration through this legislation. Pass. First, pass for utilitarianism, because through this legislation, employees and employers alike will reap benefits. According to a report by the Society of Human Resource Management, the cost of replacing an employee can range from 50% to 200% of an employee's annual salary. This includes the costs associated with recruiting, hiring, and training a new employee. But in the status quo specific terms, the conditions of the TRAs can widely depend on an employer, industry, and even region. So Senator Bhattacharya's analysis of the status quo, it actually varies from region to region. So in the East, we have more urbanized companies taking advantage of their employees by making their employees overcompensate, while in the Midwest, companies are taking a loss at virtually no compensation methods. According to the Association of Talent Development, organizations spend an average of $1,200 per employee on training and development initiatives. Business Insider explained that in Washington, employees have to repay $1.9K for training that costs a mere $12K. And in California, employees repay a mere $200. In the status quo, the interregional sovereignty has led to a precedence of over and under compensation. But under the specific 75% outlined under Section 2B, We solve for the systemic issues at hand. So employees and employers alike will foresee standard jurisdiction. Not only foresee that standard jurisdiction, but also reduce the financial burden on both employees and employers, while promoting culture of skill development and long-term employment. So when we assess Senator Mohammed and Bazarbaki's arguments about how the cost of this legislation will trickle down to our constituents, we already see that outlined by my first contention, they're already being exploited in the status quo. What we would be doing instead is making sure that companies are still receiving money while the people themselves aren't overcompensating. But what Senator Altman's legislation aims to achieve is provide for everyone. Just as we provide for everyone under this legislation, Senator Singh, Mohammed, and Bazarbaki, we still operate under the law. So any issue of maltreatment and will still be subjected to under the law, and it will take place in a higher up court, and they still can sue. Let's weave together a conclusion with pass today's legislation.
Thank you, Senator Patel, for that speech in the affirmation of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. All questioners, please rise. Senator Singh.
Great speech. So what about those employees who aren't in a state where they can go to the police or file a case in higher law? Like, what if they need to leave?
Can you outline what state that's happening in? Because to my knowledge, there's a
I mean, it's not really, I mean, there's not really an evidence of that. Like, no one would just admit that they can't go to police and tell them. I mean, but in lower income areas.
Can you outline where that's happening? Because to my knowledge, that is not
I mean, in lower
here.
income areas, in slums where police don't do their jobs.
Once again, can you
Senator
outline?
Bazarbaki.
To my knowledge, it's not occurring.
Hey, Senator, do you believe in freedom?
Of course, I believe in freedom.
So why do you affirm legislation that strips employees from their freedom to leave their jobs?
It's not stripping them from their freedom to leave their jobs, because
It
still have
is.
the option to leave their jobs if they truly so desire. Through
But
self-regulation.
okay, let's take that situation. Why would these individuals leave their jobs if they need the money? They wouldn't actually have
Then
the
they'd
freedom
stay
to
with
leave
the
because
job.
they
And
need the money.
if they have an issue of maltreatment within the jobs, once again, they can seek legal action, as I already outlined in the last contention.
No, they can't, because they're bound to staying in that job to get their paycheck. Otherwise,
Then
they're gonna
once again,
have
they
to give
stay.
The
in
question
the
block
job,
has
75%.
want to
lapsed
stay in
and
the
the
job.
speaker may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, all negative speakers, please rise. That will go to Senator Collier.
Hey everyone, that's Senator Collier, Collier. I'm speaking for the second and hopefully last time today, and I'll begin when y'all are ready. Thus far, this Congress has completely misconstrued the implications of this bill. I want today to shift the dynamics from focusing on small companies to bigness, because inherently the problem in the status quo isn't with small businesses that are losing money, but it's the employees that are being exploited by the industry. So today, let's shift the paradigm to corporation versus consumers. And first, outlining the employee debts. Now, this has been acknowledged before, but let me further, as Forbes tells us July 19th of 2021, that more workers empirically are starting jobs in debt because of these very agreements. Now, Senator Mohammed actually alluded to one example in Ohio, but let me tell you about another one. The Illinois Northern District of former employees of Edward R. Jones were suing over a TRAP agreement in which they had to pay $75,000 after quitting. Now, empirically, this is the kind of thing that is happening in the status quo. Now, I want to debunk this idea that all these agreements are completely consensual, because although, yes, they're putting their signature down when they take the contract, legal jargon is not accessible to employees. Because, as Business in Vancouver describes in 2018, linguistic ambiguity in contracts is a liability for employees. Just because it's in the fine print doesn't mean we can expect all of our constituents to read it, especially not the low-income ones. But also, let me tell you about a part of this bill that has not been mentioned whatsoever. actually the non-compete agreements. Section 1B postulates that non-compete agreements can be used in conjunction with this bill. And in the status quo, it's not applicable on a federal level. Thus, the impact when you pass this bill is you're allowing Fortune 500 companies to use these non-compete agreements. Let me tell you why that's so bad. Because as the New Yorker tells us January 10th of 2023, the prohibition on workers taking jobs with competitors, that is the impact. Non-compete agreements lower wage by 5% because they decrease competition, but they also reduce the worker's ability to take a job with the industry's competitor. So understand that in this bill, not only are you further strengthening the right of a corporation to exploit its employee, but also it decreases competition in our capitalist society and wages are further lowered. So today, don't look at small businesses. Focus on the dynamic between corporation versus consumers and think about our low income constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collier, for that speech in the negation of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. All questioners, please rise. Senator Sullivan.
So do covenant to compete agreements not keep companies safe by keeping trade secrets within like the company?
Okay, how would trade secrets apply to like flipping burgers at McDonald's?
I mean, like you talked about Fortune 500 companies. I'm not sure how that becomes McDonald's now, but would that
McDonald's
not keep them
isn't
safe
Fortune.
because there's a way that McDonald's does it that Burger King doesn't do it, and they don't want Burger King finding out about it.
Okay, but the problem is that's simply for corporate profit. You have to focus on the levels of competition that are decreased because of these non-compete agreements.
Yeah, so you don't want to be able to go get a job somewhere else that would pay you more to give them their trade secrets. That's what the covenant to
Senator
compete keeps
Patel.
the company.
As I already explained in my speech, is exploitation currently taking place?
Yes,
And is it at worse levels than the exploitation under this legislation?
I can tell you as someone who works at Chick-fil-A.
Would you rather pay 112% of what your training costs or 75%?
Okay, but I don't think that the CEO of Chick-fil-A, who is a billionaire, is really
It's not
losing
about
a
what
lot of
he
money
thinks
when he has to train
that
his
they themselves
employees.
have in place.
Like this
It's
is
not-
just big business. The affirmative side is purely advocating for big business.
What I'm advocating for is for the people actually, and I'm saying that they'll be paying less.
Well,
than
that
half.
clearly doesn't align with your statements.
The
I did.
question clock has elapsed and the speaker may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, all affirmative speakers, please raise a placard. Off of recency, Senator Nguyen.
I think the chair, that's Senator Nguyen speaking for the last time in this tournament. Very happy to be here. Very great day. Happy Easter. I'll take a no sign. No sign if you're not ready. Perfect. Businesses are the cloak of our economy, the connection of our basic necessities, and the collective hopes of society. But as progression begins to light up this nation, the ammunition of businesses are running out, and the shining beacon of happiness, hope, and humanity are fading away. Flip the switch and write a story for those who have done. Honestly, I'm terrible at reading, but I think everyone has just misread this legislation. Here's where I'm the academic weapon. There's two lenses. A, whether workers will keep their jobs, but B, what they would even do with their jobs in the first place. Open the book to chapter 1. Will workers stay in their job? Now, Senator Mohammed and Singh would contend that workers feel like they're trapped with these programs. 5 cycles in, no one has even told you why. The Washington Post tells us in February 2023, these programs are set for a long time, sometimes a few years. That's why people feel like they're trapped. But you know what's really crazy? That's the status quo. These programs are already existing. No one in this round has showed you what this bill uniquely changes. The only thing that functionally changes is Section 2B. I want to frame this round around that. Section 2B says employees will only recoup 75% of all training costs they spent on the program. Senator Mohammed, Bazarbachi, and Collier all says this is a bad thing. I just disagree. Senator Bazarbachi, we aren't stripping their freedoms. They can still leave, but they just have to pay 75%. But guess what? The businesses also lose 25% of the money they spent initially. As capitalistic as good old America, Senator Bazarbachi, companies don't want that. With Section 2B, this bill gives them an incentive to lower the time on their programs to make sure their workers don't feel like they're trapped. Senator Mohammed and Singh, if you think these programs are forced labor right now, this bill changes that. Turn every negation argument to my side. Senator Singh, if they face harassment during this time, that's still illegal. You can still charge them for it. This bill doesn't change crime. But Senator Kaler, if you want businesses to stop exploiting their workers, this bill is the way. Companies care about keeping their workers. Now, they just have to do it fairly. The Center for American Progress finds employee turnover is 16% of an entire business budget. Today, we tell them if they want millions in their pockets, they have to value millions of people too. This bill is a financial incentive for them to finally care. Why? I'm honestly appalled that no one on my side have told you the benefits. Flip the page to chapter 2, the workers playbook. What would they do with their job? They work harder. Don't take it from me. I mean, I can't read. Work accepts fines. Lower employee turnover creates a perception of the people like the environment of their job. That creates more productivity. I mean, if one person smiles, everyone smiles. The Bureau of Labor Statistics finds the more productivity your company is, the more it expands in financial growth to hire more workers. This ends the book of the negation. Senator Kaler, if workers want to leave and find another job, this bill opens more opportunities for them to do so. Now, Senator Bazarbachi wanted to make an amendment on the time in Section 1A. You know what time also equals to? Time equals to money. Your people are running out of time. I spent some time writing this book for them. It's time we write them a new chapter.
Thank you, Senator Nguyen, for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. In the affirmation, all questioners please raise a placard. That will first go to Senator Collier.
Aye.
Hey, Representative Senator, great speech. So if an employer is prohibited from working at a competitive industry after they self-terminate, how is that beneficial to their wages?
So I think like when you apply to a job, you should probably know like the competitor like company is not going to hire you after, right? Like if there's two companies fighting with each other and you like apply to like one other job before even getting the job, you should probably know if you get
Okay.
fired from a job or you leave.
Okay, in a capitalist society, isn't every company in the same sector technically a competitor?
I mean, they're all no, not necessarily. They're competing against each other. It's
Senator
not-
Mohammed.
It's like
When it comes to the practices of when it comes to these practices, would this not just lead to more negative practices for small businesses and medium-sized?
no, I told you because
by
this
quitting?
bill- I told you with Section 2B, this builds an incentive to make sure the practices are like good.
Once again, if people are forced to work in a business for 90 days, would that not lead to practices such as quiet quitting where people aren't allowed to
No,
leave without
so I
financial
told you the
risk?
reason why people feel like they're forced to work is because these programs are taking too long in the status quo. When you pass,
Once again, are these programs in all businesses? Because this legislation would push it to be such.
no, but this bill makes sure the programs right now are fixed. Plus, add programs.
Does
to,
it
like,
actually change the? Does it
I
actually
think
set a
programs on,
maximum?
like, forced labor, I'd
I
say,
guess
like,
we'll never know. The question time has elapsed and the speaker may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, all speakers in the negation, please raise a placard. Any and all speakers in the negation. Senator Singh.
You're muted.
All right, technical timeout. For the sake of decorum, can a brief recess be called? Senator Nguyen,
motion for an indefinite recess.
the chair will automatically approve that until our recognized speaker will return.
I think she has an issue with her computer where she can't unmute herself. So like she needs like the person to unmute her.
Guys, why don't we pass the amendment?
And we still can.
Yeah, we can't, Senator Singh, we can't hear you. Is there a way you can get another device on?
It says you're unmuted. Could you unplug your headset and replug it back in? That worked last session.
Try unplugging your headset completely and just using
Okay.
your computers.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
The floor
Can
is
I, can I
yours.
give my?
The recess has ended and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, like. Okay. Representatives, imagine you're at a fancy restaurant about to indulge in a delectable meal, but just as you're about to take the first bite, a waiter swoops in and snatches away your plate, claiming that you didn't appreciate the chef's hard work enough. That's exactly what this bill feels like, a trading repayment agreement that snatches away your hard-earned money for daring to leave a job before you've even finished your appetizer. So today I'm here to say, let's send this bill back to the kitchen and order something else. We failed this legislation today for a plethora of reasons. According to a survey conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management, the average cost per hire for companies in the US is $4,129. This includes not only the cost of recruitment, but also the cost of training new hirees. With the proposed bill allowing employers to recoup up to 75% of training costs if an employee leaves during their probationary period, this means that if employees could potentially be on the hook for thousands of dollars in training costs if they leave their job before their probationary period is up. For employees who are just starting out in their careers or those who are from disadvantaged backgrounds, this is a huge financial burden. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, the average starting salary for college graduates in the US in 2021 was $55,260. For someone making that salary, having to pay back a significant portion of their training costs would be a major financial setback. Representative Oltmann, you're worried about prices going up for low-income consumers, but if you were really worried about low-income consumers, you would fill this legislation because those people are the same people being forced to pay back their minimum wage jobs. Like Senator Deep Patel mentions in questioning, are the main sectors who implement training. Representative Nguyen, in questioning, you say that people should research their jobs before they apply but many low-income people do not have access to materials like the internet that enable them to research job conditions. Senator Sullivan, it may just be 90 days of enduring experience in the workforce for you, but for constituents who are assaulted, harassed, or mistreated at work, it feels like 90 years, who should have the ability to leave whenever they want. You also talk about how employee productivity increases with this bill, but according to a study by the Society for Human Resource Management, job satisfaction is strongly correlated with employee turnover rates. If employees are hesitant to leave a job due to the potential cost of training reimbursement, they may remain in a job they aren't happy with, leading to lower job satisfaction and productivity. Furthermore, a report by the National Bureau of Economic Research finds that increased job mobility is associated with higher productivity and wages. By treating training as a financial transaction, this bill could send the message to employers that investing in employee training is only worthwhile if it leads to long-term commitment from the employee. This perspective is short-sighted and undermines the value of employee training as a means of increasing productivity and contributing to the success of the company. Representatives, just as a chef would never snatch away a plate from a customer, we cannot allow this bill to snatch away hard-earned money from employees who simply just want to explore their career options. So let's send this bill back to the kitchen and order something else, something that values both employees and employers. Fail this legislation.
Thank you, Senator Singh, for that speech in the negation of 2 minutes and 53 seconds. All questioners, please rise. That will first go to Senator Chalaka.
Okay, so you state that 90 days is a lot for like employees who are being assaulted, harassed, or mistreated, correct?
Yes.
So do you know what the status quo for the situation is right now for training repayment agreements?
I'm sure you can enlighten me.
Okay, it's about 12 months on average. So isn't 90 days a lot better than like 12 months?
It's definitely a lot better, but 90 days isn't good either. Like, it's better than what we have in the status quo, but we could be passing something else that would be much better than 90 days.
But isn't this a net benefit? Can we like benefit the people by passing right now?
Burgess.
I mean, in the first.
Thank you, Senator Singh, for your speech. You mentioned the costs of low-wage workers, but aren't the costs of training a low-wage worker significantly less than they would be for high-wage jobs in the United States?
It is significantly less, but these workers also earn a lot less. And they're usually in the worst financial situations that we can assume. So they obviously don't have the money to pay.
But do you have any statistics about the dollar amount that these people are having to pay back?
I mean, I already mentioned that it would be in thousands from a study that I stated. I think it was
but
from the
big businesses who
the question time has elapsed and the speaker may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in negation, all affirmative speakers, please rise. Senator Chalaka.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Senator
Burgess. Were you standing? Senator Burgess, was your placard up?
I believe so, but Senator Chalaka should have precedence or recency.
Based on recency, you would have recency.
Oh, okay.
I am correct.
No, order? That's not necessary.
I am incorrect, sorry. Senator Chalaka, you may have the floor.
Okay. All right. Hi, guys. I'm Senator Chalaka, spelled Chalaka. As always, I'm at the leisure of those above me. I'll just give my judges a couple seconds to get ready, and then I will begin. Today's debate could be represented by the points on a bull. On one side, we have the negations point about hurting constituents here. And on the other side, we have the affirmations point about actually caring about businesses for once. And then there's a whole lot of bull in between. And so let me cut through all that and show you why the affirmation wins today's debate. The single biggest thing that the negation has championed is that we hurt constituents. Let me show you why this is misguided. Stated perfectly by Senator Nguyen, all of these training programs already occur in the status quo. According to a survey conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management in 2020, the most common length for a training repayment agreement is 12 months. This is 12 months, a lot worse than 90 days. The only benefit is that they give a little bit more money back. And so for those of you that are so pressed about the 90 days, that's a lot better than the status quo right now. The only thing that changes is Section 2B. And I argue that a 10-month decrease is worth the money, especially when they're being assaulted, harassed, or even mistreated, as stated by Senator Singh. But finally, what the negation is forgetting is that if you benefit these companies by giving them money back, especially small businesses, you eventually benefit the people. Pass to boost innovation. Senator Sullivan states that we protect small businesses when we pass, but she fails to show you the impact. I'll pick up where she left off. A study by the National Bureau of Economics Research found that small businesses that receive financial support are more likely to invest in innovation and technology. By recouping some of the costs associated with training new employees, businesses will have more money available to invest in new technologies and processes, which can lead to increased efficiency, productivity, and competitiveness. This in turn can lead to the creation of new jobs and the growth of the economy. Moreover, training repayment agreements can help small businesses compete with larger companies in terms of attracting and retaining new talent. A study by the National Federation of Independent Businesses found that 22% of businesses reported a lack of skilled workers was their top business problem. By offering training repayment agreements, small businesses can provide competitive compensation packages, including training and development opportunities to attract top talent. This can lead to a more skilled workforce, which can further innovation and productivity. But finally, according to the Small Business Administration, small businesses accounted for 65% of net new jobs created in the United States between 2000 and 2018. By supporting small businesses through legislation like this, we can ensure that they continue to play a vital role in innovation, job creation, and finally, economic growth. We can help the very constituents that the negation thinks that we will harm. So it looks like I've sorted through a lot of this bull, and I've definitely shown you why the affirmation wins. Let's help these businesses and pass.
Thank you, Senator Chaloka, for that speech in the affirmation of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. A reminder to your chamber, do not raise your placards until I call so. Any questioners, please rise. That will first go to Senator that will first go to Senator Bazarbaki.
Hey, Senator, isn't 90 days of assault and harassment in the workplace bad?
Okay, 90 days is pretty bad, but would you also—
Sure, that's not the question. So why do you stand in affirmation of a bill that still maintains those 90 days?
Okay, the thing is, what you got to realize is that this harassment and all those things, they don't immediately occur when you get in the workplace. A lot of those things are more long-term problems that happen after like—
Wait, but this bill still keeps that on the table. So why aren't you willing to amend this legislation to make the period only 30 days and then pass?
Senator Pern-Tessin.
So your idea comes down to like regulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What percent of American jobs actually have this repayment program currently?
Not sure. You could tell me.
Only 10% of jobs in America have this program. Wouldn't we see a massive increase? You know, that 90%?
Okay. So wait, what's your question here?
Isn't it still bad if we're applying it to the other 90% of America?
Wait, but I also stated that this entire program could also help boost innovation and increase employment.
Right, you're still requiring 90% of America to acquire to a program that no longer—
The question block has elapsed and the speaker may be muted. Seeing as that will speech in the affirmation, all negative speakers, please rise. And speaking in negation, Senator Brentessen.
I thank the chair, that's Senator Brenneson, speaking for the second and probably last time in this legislative session. Any sign from my judges that they're not ready for me to begin, and I will just get moving with my speech in like the next 10 seconds or so. I don't see any. Good to go. Perfect. I'll just get moving with my speech then. Senator Chillicothe, on the affirmation, the last speaker, said he wanted to cut through the bull, to clarify today's round and reduce it, and show why the affirmation clearly wins. Now, I simply am going to do the same thing, but show why the negation wins today's round. We're going to do this by comparing the worlds, the affirmation and the negation. So first, the affirmations world, the world of regulation. This is the main idea that the affirmation has come down to. It's the fact that, well, we no longer have to worry about companies charging too much, affecting employees too much, because we actually have a national standard. This idea was championed by Representative Deep Patel, Nguyen, and Chillicothe. So when talking about this, we need to understand, fundamentally speaking, only 10% of America actually is impacted currently by the lack of regulation. From the Cornell survey for Research Institute, nationally surveyed the Americas and found that, well, realistically, it affects a very small portions of the population and very select industries already. So when talking about a lack of regulation, we're only seeing it on an extremely small scale. So when Senator Mohammed stands up here and champions the fact that this industry is still being unregulated, I agree. Since we're on the same side, why don't we just get rid of these trap programs, as it's making it hard for people to actually leave jobs when they need to. This is the main point of the negation. So in the affirmations world, when 100% of all workers in America are trapped within their jobs because they can no longer afford to leave, we see massive impacts on their psyche. In fact, from the American Society for Training Development, found in 2013, that companies have to invest in training, but this training, if it is in conjunction with a trap program, would trap people in jobs even if they are negatively impacted by them. What does this mean, though? It means that we're seeing a massive impacts on mental health within workers, leading to a lack of innovation, lack in worker productivity, and overall downturn for all people in this field. This is the true impact that the affirmation will see. We're not going to see massive benefits like Senator Nguyen or Senator Chillicothe says on the affirmation. But let's turn our eyes to the world of the negation. What happens when we fail? Well, the status quo continues. Only 10% of America is impacted by the lack of regulation. And this Congress is already talking about better ways to solve and fix for the problems currently seen. That is the true benefit of failing. We have the actual ability to make good change, not just change that is strictly in front of us. We already saw one amendment attempt to be made with today's legislation, showing that this bill is not the best solution. Let's actually strive for perfection in an area that needs to benefit all Americans, not just mega corporations. This is why we have to negate.
Thank you, Senator Bernison, for that speech in the negation of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. All questioners, please rise. That's first going to go to Senator Oltmann.
Hi. So in states like Washington, where employees already are paying like more than 75% for recompensation, wouldn't this legislation just means those employees are now paying less?
Yeah, sure. But you're also requiring the 32% of America workers that work for under $15 an hour to enter these same programs. I don't want to benefit my minuscule amount when we're costing an additional 32% more.
Right. But if these programs are already existing under the status,
yeah, let's get rid of
Senator
them.
Mohammed.
I would want to just get rid of them.
Looking at lines 5 and 6 of the bill itself, does this bill actually remove any of the longer time frames that are set, or does it just set a minimum of 90 days?
Yeah, it just sets a minimum of 90 days. This is something that I wanted to bring up in my speech, but I ran out of time about. we're not actually setting a true regulation. We're only setting a minimum for that other 90% of workers that are not currently impacted by trap programs. We're going to see a massive impact on
The questioning
worker
block has
productivity.
elapsed and the speaker may take a seat or mute their speaker. Senator Bazarbaki, is that in motion?
Motion to make a different amendment in order to affect the voting outcomes.
If your amendment is typed out and accessible to the chamber, please do send it in the chat so that
It
the
is.
parliamentarian can make a ruling on its germanity. Okay. Parliamentarian, is the amendment germane?
Yeah, it's germane.
Okay, the amendment has been ruled germane, so we are now moving to a vote requiring 1/3 of the chamber to debate the amendment, to rule the amendment. Are all in favor of this amendment, please raise a placard. I count 4. And that is 1/3. So we are now moving to a 2/3 vote to move to previous question on the previous question. So all those in favor of moving to previous question, please raise a placard. 1 Senator Patel, 2 Senator Chalaka, 3 Senator Burgess, 4 Senator Sullivan, 5 Senator Burnison, 6 Senator Nguyen, 7 Senator Collier, 8 Senator Altman. That's 2/3 majority. We now need a simple majority or a 1/2 majority to actually debate the amendment and proceed with it. The amendment passed. All those in favor of debating and moving forward to debate on this amendment, please raise a placard. 1 Senator Bazarbaki, 2 Senator Altman,
Motion.
3 Senator Patel, 4 Senator Chalaka, and 5 Senator Burgess. With
Motion.
5 votes in a chamber of 11, that will once again fall just short. My condolences to the sponsor of the amendment. The bill
Motion.
remains unamended.
Senator Bazarbaki has a
State that.
To address the chamber.
That is out of order and decorum. However, a brief recess may be entertained.
Motion for a 20-second in-house recess.
Are there seconds? Any who oppose? 20 seconds on the clock.
Okay, guys, so the reason why I'm trying to propose this amendment, because we've seen a lot of different arguments brought up on both sides. Like, we've got the affirmation saying that you need enough time to determine if the job is good, and the negation is arguing that like we need to have them be able to exit. So I just guys vote for it. Trust will vote at the end and just
The
amend.
recess has elapsed.
Listen.
Would you like to extend the
Motion.
recess? Senator
motion.
Collier,
Motion to extend the recess indefinitely.
indefinitely. I will rule that out of order in the interest of time.
1 minute.
Are there any seconds? Are there any who oppose? Reminder to your chamber that our hard stop is at 7 p.m.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, not only is our hard stop in 10 minutes, but also like fundamentally.
Y'all need to listen. There's one speaker left. Listen to that speaker. I think we should listen to whether he wants to amend it or not. And that's how I'm gonna vote.
Yeah, so I know I kind of put myself in this position by the precedents, but I've yet to speak. I'd like to speak, and I think we
What?
continue the cycle because I have an F. So
Do you support the amendment or not? Based on that, I'm voting.
no, I
wasn't
do not support the
advocating-
amendment.
I wasn't advocating for moving to previous question. I was just saying that we don't need to pass the amendment in the interest of time. But unless
But
you.
like it wouldn't be, it won't take time.
Guys,
It'll
guys,
be a
guys,
quick-
There's
let the
one,
speaker speak.
there is
That's
one
priority
person
at
who
this
hasn't
point.
spoken.
Listen
There's-
to the speaker.
that's
That's
it.
what I'm voting by.
There's literally only one person who hasn't spoken who wants to speak. Let's let them speak and finish the
Yeah,
round.
then we can work
Exactly.
on the amendment.
Hey, no one
Yeah,
was.
it's
advocating
Easter.
for
Can we
the
finish the round,
Just go.
please?
10 seconds remaining.
I'm just trying to have a bill that we can actually pass and make change in the
We can
Congress.
do that
And I
after
wanna
the
have
last
Easter
guy-
dinner.
the last speaker speaks.
I'm ready for
That's
Easter
priority.
dinner.
Y'all are off.
Recess has elapsed. Please return to decorum at this time. Seeing as the amendment has once more failed, we are now in line for a speaker in the affirmation on the unamended bill. Are there any such speakers? Senator Burgess.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Senator Burgess, spelled Burchess. I'm going to go ahead and assume everyone's ready, and then we can end this session. Senators, like any good politician, I'm going to rely on a great phrase. Small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. And by failing this legislation, You vote against that backbone. Senators, we passed today's legislation because of the definition of training repayment programs. The National Labor Relations Board, which is where we'd get this definition as it is not in the legislation, said in 2023 that TRAP programs are contracts that require employees to pay for their employer for a certain period of time or else repay their employer for the cost of free training provided on the job. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle framed this argument around the idea that these corporations are exploiting their employees. But this idea is just wrong per the definition. Senator Mohammed and Senator Singh, you say that this legislation will disproportionately harm the bottom half of the socioeconomic sphere. But this legislation isn't tailored to retail and fast food jobs. It's tailored to those in the top 10% of earners in the country. Will Marianne writes in his essay on training repayment programs for the Heritage Foundation in 2021 that these programs are specifically designed for career-based jobs that spend thousands of dollars on training, like banking executives, tech-based companies, engineers, and jobs that more often than not require a college degree. So when Senator Mohammed and Senator Singh get up here and they tell you that this disproportionately harms poorer communities, they are dead wrong. Because the companies that would be trying to reap the benefits in from this are those making billions of dollars, or are those small businesses, like I said in the opening of my speech. Senator Singh and Senator Mohammed and Senator Bozdabachi in questioning ask about being trapped in the jobs that they don't like. But as a highly contentious amendment debate has played out, it's only 90 days. That's less than a semester of schooling. Senator Mohammed and others question about the safety of our constituents when it comes to things like sexual harassment. But luckily, this body just passed legislation that would make it easier to pursue justice. The law still stands, senators. Senator Brentenson, you argue that we should be striving for perfection, but the quest for perfection should not get in the way of progress. Senator Collier, you got up here and gave a passionate speech about how this body is protecting big businesses by passing, but then you completely ignore the impact this legislation would have on small businesses. Senators, let's protect the American middle class and let's protect small businesses. We all took an oath to protect our constituents, but by voting against this legislation, you vote against that oath. Join Senator Altman, Sullivan, D. Patel, Nguyen, Chilaka, and I, and let's not trap our nation's small businesses, and let's pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Burgess, for that speech in the affirmation of 2 minutes and 57 seconds. Reminder to your chamber, do not raise your placard when the speaker is giving a speech that is highly disrespectful. And questioners, please rise. That will first go to Senator Berntessen.
Thanks so much for that speech.
Point of order.
State that.
I believe I have recency over Senator Berntessen.
If your placard was up, I apologize for not seeing it. You do have recency.
So, am I recognized? How will this bill passing affect summer jobs that last shorter than 90 days?
Right. So I'm assuming that can be worked out in committee. By saying that by not passing this bill because of certain little minuscule details like that is copping out, and it's a cop out to the American people.
Okay, so if a job lasts shorter than 90 days, those people won't have to repay that. They won't have to repay the companies back if their job doesn't last a full 90 days.
I'm sure that could be worked out in committee.
Okay, thank you.
Chair will absorb 3 seconds. Senator Berntessen.
If someone leaves their job because they're being sexually harassed within the first 90 days, do they still have to pay back the training costs?
Right. So again, that's something that could
Senator,
be worked out in committee.
Yes or
but
no?
this legislation,
Senator,
but this
yes
body,
or no under today's legislation?
No.
That is
The answer is no.
fundamentally wrong. According to today's legislation, if they self-terminate, they have to pay it back. You're requiring victims of sexual assault to pay back.
But if they were
okay, thank you for agreeing
if businesses were found guilty of discrimination, that would obviously be under the scope of the courts, and they wouldn't have to be.
Current state of America. I'm
The
appalled.
questioning block has elapsed, and the speaker may be muted. Senator Patel, is that a motion?
To previous question.
Are there any seconds for this motion? Are there any who oppose this motion? Seeing no opposition, we are now moving to previous question on legislation piece 4B, a bill to protect business owners from resource loss. All those in favor of passing this bill, please raise your placard and lower it when I call your name. That's 1 Senator Patel, 2 Senator Altman, 3 Senator Chalaka, 4 Senator Nguyen, 5 Senator Sullivan, 6 Senator Burgess. I count 6. All those who wish to fail this piece of legislation, please raise a placard. 1 Senator Singh, 2 Senator Burnison, 3 Senator Mohammed, 4 Senator Collier, and 5 Senator Bazarbaki. I count 5. There should be no abstentions. On a vote of 6 to 5 to 0, this bill will pass. My congratulations to the sponsor, Senator Altman, and the Biggest Bird Institute. Is there a motion to move to orders of the day?
Motion.
Senator Collier.
Motion to move to orders of the day.
The chair will unilaterally recognize that, seeing as we are nearing our hard stop. Thank you everyone for having me as a presiding officer today. I am not a competitor to judges, so please do not rank me. However, we had a wonderfully productive session. So in total, we got through 21 speeches and 50 questions. Every senator gave at least 1 speech and asked at least 2 questions. This round did indeed live up to its billing of a final round. Every speech was at least 2 minutes and 30 seconds long, and we only broke cycle on debate 1 time across 2 pieces of legislation, so a round of applause for that silently. Out of legislation that we debated, we passed 2 out of 2 pieces of legislation incredibly productive, more so than the US Congress. We passed both Bill 4A, a bill to eliminate forced arbitration in employment, consumer antitrust, and civil rights disputes, as well as Bill 4B, a bill to protect business owners from resource loss. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our leaders in questioning, which were Senator Mohammed and Senator Patel, followed immediately by Senator Nguyen, Senator Singh, Senator Collier, Senator Bazarbaki, and Senator Burnison. And with that, it is quite late in the Easter evening, or some of you may be in a different time zone.